All right, so this is Two Glasses and a Movie. I'm Connor.
And I'm Tanner, and we've got another movie for you today.
Got another doozy for you to go through. So today we'll be looking at Bloodrayne, which got a really, really bad 3 on IMDb. And this 2005 film had a budget of 25 million and at the box office did 3.7 million. It does have a few stars in it that are kind of surprising to see when you look at who's in it. So the main girl, I don't know for sure how you say her first name, Christina. I don't really know how you say her name, Loken, but she's the robot from T3, Terminator 3, which I thought was interesting. But then the rest of the cast,
I didn't know
there's
that.
been there's Ben Kingsley, there's Michael Madsen, and Michelle Rodriguez, and then didn't write the dude's name down because he wasn't as big of a name, but the boyfriend from Legally Blonde that Elle's trying to
I
get back
didn't know
with.
that's who that was
He's
either.
yeah. I forget his name, but I didn't write him down as an important person. But the other three, Michelle Rodriguez, Michael Madsen, and Ben Kingsley are somebodies. They're not total nobodies. So
For sure.
kind of those stars in this movie. So a quick synopsis of the movie, which is more than we would have got at the beginning of watching the movie,
Yep.
as Tanner knows. But in 18th century Romania, after spending much of her life in a traveling circus, human vampire hybrid Rain escapes and plots to take down her evil vampire father, Kagan, when she's discovered by 3 vampire hunters, Vladimir, Katrine, and Sebastian. They manage to convince them to spare her life and join her cause. But slaying a vampire as powerful as Kagan will be no easy task. So Tanner, what were just some 1 or 2 main highlights off the start of it that you want to share?
So, when the movie first started, one of the first things I noticed, I was like, man, these sets are like pretty good. I felt like, it's kind of set in this vague medieval times kind of. And I was like, this genuinely looks like a kind of bigger studio, bigger budget kind of movie. The kind of peasant costumes, it's got a lot of horses, it's got a lot of different kind of cathedral settings and city streets and stuff. And really throughout the whole movie, I was like, this has a pretty great setting. There's a lot of, horses riding on cliffs. I felt like one of the biggest things it had going for it, I was like, this movie looks pretty good. Like the sets and stuff doesn't look super cheap or super fake for the most part. And so then when the movie proceeds to kind of like not be very good, you're like, well, you guys at least looked pretty good and had something going for you. A couple things right off the bat, when the movie first starts, just what you're seeing, you don't know that it even is a vampire movie, technically. You don't know that right away. And then one of the characters stabs this dude in the chest, and the dude kind of shrivels the way that vampires do. And you're like, oh, I guess that was just a vampire, and that dude knew it. And he just stabbed him in front of everybody. And so then, pretty much from that moment, I start having all kinds of questions. Because I'm like, are vampires just common in this society? Are people not surprised? Do people just know? I just had a bunch of questions like that where I was like, okay, I'm not sure what we're getting into here. So that it was just such a like kind of abrupt way to start without you having any knowledge, where you're like, well, I already have a lot of questions and you guys haven't even gotten into the actual story yet. And then as soon as Rain is announced, she's part of this carnival, they're doing this sideshow type of thing. And the guy's like, when she puts her arm in water, it burns her. And you're like, I don't know why that is. And then he cuts her arm, and you're like, I don't know why he's doing that. Then he feeds her goat blood and she heals. And you're like, I'm pretty confused about what is happening here. Like, it just kind of immediately, like, I don't get what this person is and what's happening. Then, really shortly after that, some person goes, "Oh, she's a damn fear," and I'm like, "She's a what now?" So, just immediately, did you notice that, and did you go, "Oh, I don't know what that is either"?
Yeah, totally. I feel like we didn't mention this. This is based on a video game, but I feel like they made it, and if you played the video game, you would have known these terms and the world and stuff like that. But we didn't, and there was zero setup for it. And I totally agree with that. I think there's a ton of things that they do that you're just kind of thrown into and not really told anything about it. Which is, oh, you can do that if you do it the right way, and they just didn't, because it was like, oh, if I would have played the video game, I think I would know what's going on. But yeah, that whole scene where he stabs the guy, I mean, no one really reacts. The bartender is like super cool and is like, oh, yeah, okay. And then they kind of like move on. And it's like, I mean, some explanation, would have been nice. Even if it was like at the beginning of it, they just shared a paragraph of some information. Even that, that would have been better. But yeah, just zero info about it.
Yeah, and I think with a couple of those, so I looked it up immediately, and it's just a half vampire, half human. Which even that, I was like, I don't know if that makes that much sense for me, but I guess it really is like an actual folklore thing, etc. So we kind of get that intro, and so then I'm kind of like, how did she get captured? How is she not able to fight back faster? Can't she just bite people? Like, just right off the bat, I'm like, well, it seems like she would be strong enough in a type of way that she wouldn't be, captured or whatever. And then, she does end up escaping pretty quickly, and that kind of sets off her part of the movie of, being loose or whatever. But, and then so right off, like another thing early on, this person gives her a crucifix and she puts it on, and then you're like, I'm confused by that. Is she a vampire or not? That's usually one of the things. And to give the movie credit, later on, someone does explain, like, yeah, she can have a crucifix because she's part human. And I think, I guess the thing with Dampiers, which I looked it up online, and it's spelled Dampier, and they were saying Dampier, and I was like, again, I'm confused. Are you, like, did the person making this just have everyone say it wrong? Or is it a language thing where it's like, no, you can pronounce it that way? But really right off the bat, there's all these little moments where you're like, I keep getting confused and having questions that are immediately taking me out. That's not how you want your movie to go for the most part, where people
Yeah.
are pretty confused as soon as it starts and have a lot of questions. But yeah, so you find out the crucifix thing, which it unlocked other questions for me. I did a brief quick reading on like a Wikipedia thing for this type of mythology. And it's kind of like they have a lot of the powers, quote unquote, of vampires, and they don't have some of the weaknesses. So the, water burns her, which I guess would be like a vampire thing, but crucifixes don't hurt her, which would be like a human thing. All in all, as the movie goes on, you're like, I'm kind of unclear on just the rules for what her type of species is, I guess. But that, that's neither here nor there. Yeah, so we kind of discussed before we started recording. The plot itself is kind of relatively standard. It's a kind of quest type movie. She learns about this talisman that the bad guy Kagan is trying to get. She decides, I'm going to go try to find that thing, pretend to give it to him, and then I'm going to kill him. And the plot itself is pretty standard for an adventure movie like that.
It's not just one talisman. There's
That's
three.
true. Right.
But they only talk about two. They end up getting two of them though, right?
Well, yes and no. He had one already. So
I missed that. Okay.
There is the eye. It's parts that were taken from this powerful vampire. There's the eye, there's the heart, and there's the bone. And he had the bone already.
Okay, I missed that and was like confused.
well, it was confusing. And I think they gave a general thing of like, when that vampire was killed by the Vampire Killing Society, because that's a whole thing. They're like, we took these parts out and buried them, and they're separated, and we don't want someone to get them. And my first reaction to that info was like, well, why didn't you just destroy the parts? Why would you separate them?
they probably couldn't be destroyed. I mean, that'd be my assumption. They didn't explain that or anything, but
For
you always
sure.
gotta assume if you're burying something that's really powerful, you can't destroy it.
Yeah, so maybe
that's
that's
basic movie 101. So.
yeah. So they put each of those things in a box and they just hide it someplace that the Vampire Killing Society knows about. The places, I guess. So she goes to find this eye. And for the most part, there were some flaws, but I liked this scene quite a bit. It was a very Indiana Jones sneaking into a place. There's like a booby trap thing. I thought that part was pretty exciting at the least. So she starts to step into this room, and these 3 or 4 giant saw blades just fly out of the floor, and they're crisscrossing around. Don't ask about the mechanics too much, or it's gonna break your brain a little bit. But that happens. She's like, the saw blades. I gotta avoid those. So she, the way she solves it in her mind, she throws her sword through the room, it sticks in the wall. That triggers the blades, and she does, just a series of crazy gymnastics that they filmed pretty quickly, so you couldn't tell. And then she just gets across the room. And I was like, well, that was exciting. It seemed just wildly unlikely to me, but okay. Like, if you're gonna show a person going through a booby trap, I want it. It didn't feel like she was actually in any risk because she's apparently a gold medal gymnast, and she just
She's the
dove and
Simone
jumped
Biles
and
of damn
hopped.
fears,
Yeah,
man.
just freaking jumped over everything. But then so she picks up the eye, and then when she lifts it up, the room starts filling with water. So there's like a second booby trap. And then so here is kind of my first biggest, not even first, but one of my biggest questions. Like, what? She takes the eye out of the box and she's staring at it, and then it just goes into her head, and she has the eye now, and you're just like,
Yeah,
whoa.
they could have explained that or something.
Yeah, no, and then so she had been in this monastery, and the monk finds that she breaks in, and he seems like pretty chill about it, and just takes her out, and he's like, yeah, you absorbed the eye, so you have the eye now.
Yeah, they are super chill, and that's why the monastery is there, is to protect the eye, and he's very cool. So maybe he's like glad because he's like, I don't have to be in this monastery anymore because our mission's over. But he's super cool about the thing that they're there for to guard, that it's like taken now. So
Yeah, they completely failed, and he doesn't seem that bothered by it. And so it's a mystical kind of movie. There's magic, so it's fine. But you can't just be like, yeah, you just absorb the eye. That's what happens with it, and then just move on. For me, I'm like, you got to give me something else, dude. Like, did you guys know that was gonna happen? Is that part of the lore? Whoever opens the box, their eye just immediately absorbs it. And then I'm like, well, I guess he said, and now water doesn't burn her anymore. So presumably she's getting stronger in theory, okay? But it's also a vampire eye, and I thought the water burning thing was from her being a vampire. So that immediately doesn't make sense again. If it's like giving her these extra vampire powers,
well, no,
it's also
that was why, like, the powers took away what she was weak against. So like, I think the heart took away like the sun, like you didn't get hurt by the sun. So they were taking away things that were hurting you. That was the point. That's why Kagan wanted each one of those.
right, but that's not how. If they're vampire parts, that doesn't make sense. Like, was that vampire immune to the sun and to
Yeah,
water?
and that's why he was the most powerful, and that's why they kept those because he was immune to them.
I guess that's fine. I don't know why he is the one that has all those immunities.
I
Obviously,
don't. Re-
that
They just they
backstory.
just they just said he was like one of the most powerful vampire who had like figured out how to do that or something. They didn't offer anything about it. They just said
Right.
that's the way that's the way the cookie crumbles. So
Yeah, I guess that's fine then. So I did like, as a we'll take a pause from just moment by moment things. Something I did enjoy overall. If you're looking for a relatively fun action, gory kind of movie, I thought they did like a pretty good job with the fight scenes, the blood, the effects. Like, for the most part, I've seen movies where you're like, this looks super fake, and obviously this wasn't as good as the best kind of movies, but I felt like overall a lot of the like blood and gore and effects and stuff looked pretty realistic, and I liked that. I appreciated that it didn't look super fake most of the time, given
I
how
I
bad
thought it
some
was
other
kind of
stuff looked.
cheesy. I thought it was a
Yeah,
little cheesy. The fighting and the
well, I'm not
blood.
going
I
to
was actually
disagree on that.
I was like a little disappointed because like every blood cut everything time there was blood, it was like a huge blood spurt that was like coming out,
Yeah,
and a lot of the fighting was like I didn't think was that. I think it could have been better.
yeah, no, you're definitely not wrong about it. Yeah, there were times where you're like, well, I don't think getting hit in that type of way would spray blood every single time. That's not how a lot of stuff works. Um, so I, on this particular point, I'm not going to be able to describe it super well, but if anyone listening is interested, you should look up these weapons that she has. So
The
they're
weapons were cool.
swords. They're swords with these handles, and then it kind of braces along her forearm, and then it sort of has another knife of sorts. So when she's swinging her arm through, she could kind of cut, at her elbow area. And I was like, that is a cool weapon, but it seems impractical to me in a couple ways, because it's kind of braced along her forearm, but it's not like strapped to her arm in any way. And so I'm just thinking, like, if it ever just slips out of her hand, if the handle kind of twists in a type of way, it's going to be not in position anymore. And I
Yeah.
was like
Oh yeah.
really
Totally.
analyzing like the way the weapons looked, and I'm like, I just don't know how practical this exact weapon and how they formed it would be for fighting with.
They'd have to be super heavy, and it's so funny because she got them from like a girl she was friends with at the circus, who I
Right.
think she said it was her father's, but it was like, what are you doing with these? Because like, there's no way you could like hold these up as a weapon or anything. Like they had to be super heavy. So it's funny that she was like,
Yeah.
take these. They were my father's.
Yeah, I mean, the girl that gives them to her, you're like, so you're part of this kind of circus. Why do you have these weapons anyway? Maybe, it's medieval times. Everyone just kind of has a sword. That's what you have to do. Maybe. Secondly, has Rain had fighting training? Has she had fighting
Dude,
training
That's
with these
that's
swords?
crazy, dude. She's already like a decent fighter with them, and they do training later, but she fights with them before that and is
Well,
like
she fights
decent.
with them immediately upon escaping from the cage.
Yeah,
So that, as you go through the movie, things where it's like, that doesn't have to be a big deal. It's whatever. They do kind of stack up and kind of form a pile of like, yeah, a bunch of these things don't make sense how and why that actually would work out. So just an interesting note about the sword. And then to jump ahead to kind of towards the end with this particular thing. So she's training, once she's with this other group, and someone hits her sword and it breaks for some reason. I haven't seen that many movies where a sword breaks, and most of the time it's during a big fight, and it's very purposeful to show you like this other person's sword is super strong. hers just breaks like when she's sparring with this other dude. And you're kind of like, why did it break? She
I
just
don't know,
got them
dude.
not that long
Yeah,
ago.
I don't know.
And
Good
so
question.
this society is like, oh, I think I got Michael Madsen's character actor is like, I think I got someone that could help you with that. And so a little later in the movie, when they're going to be kind of going on their final, siege towards the villain, this blacksmith, I guess, gives her new weapons, which are very obviously inferior to the ones she had. They're not really the same size or shape of weapon. They don't have the whole thing along her arm with the extra knives. And this was one of the moments where I was like, maybe you guys were running out of budget, because it looks like the type of weapon where someone melted a bunch of aluminum and then made a sword out of it. And I thought it was just a funny thing of like, so you couldn't have made her like something as good as what she had. You made her like a worse weapon. You were like, hey, I hope you like this, okay? But they didn't make any reference to how it didn't look similar and it seemed cheaper. I thought that was just funny.
Dude, I wonder. So I don't remember the whole scene, but I wonder if the sword broke on accident while they were filming.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised,
That
obviously,
would
because
that'd be wild.
there's types of things where you're like, okay, I see how they used a lot of the budget on X, Y, and Z. And then there's other moments where you're like, you should have maybe put a little more of the budget towards that particular thing because it's noticeably, not working.
I wonder too. I wonder if in the video game there is something where she gets a new weapon, or like the weapon that she does get resembles more of like the weapon she's supposed to have, and
Yeah,
unfortunately, it just wasn't portrayed like that in the movie.
I could definitely see that being the case. And on that, just on that kind of video game note, I think we might talk a little more at the end, but I felt like overall, there were sort of moments throughout the plot where I was like, oh, they're trying to mimic the way that things would happen in a video game rather than like making a kind of complete standalone type of story and movie. I felt like there were moments where they were like, maybe there was like a aspect of problem solving that they like specifically wrote into the movie where you're like, oh, I guess that's just supposed to seem like how the game would be. And I think theoretically the best movies based on some video games don't try to make it look like just how you play the game, or they don't try to like fit some type of game mechanic into the storyline. And I kind of feel like there was moments where they did that.
Yeah.
So I think let's jump back into kind of the story specific things and a few moments where you're like, I don't know what's going on here. So the let's see, there was a guy named Dostamir, something like that, who's kind of like the main knight henchman for the villain Kagan. And so he has like captured Rain. They had a battle. He's captured her. And I guess he stops by like a friend's kind of mansion place to stay over for the night. So when he first comes up on this dude, it's kind of a creepy old vampire guy with just a bunch of hot naked women on the bed. And you're like, cool for you, guy, but what's happening here? What exactly am I looking at? And so then, they kind of, there's going to be a sort of fight scene in that area, and you kind of see like, oh, this guy is, a slumlord, drug dealer kind of character, maybe, that he has different humans chained up here and there where they're kind of taking the blood from them, and you're just supposed to get the idea like, oh, this is like I don't know, this is some kind of like crack house for vampires,
Yeah,
basically.
it's like a brothel.
Yeah, which I don't feel like this particular part had any purpose in the movie.
Well,
It
he
didn't
was looking
really.
for somewhere to go to stay. Like he needed
I guess, yeah, he just needed to
he
stay
needed
somewhere.
refuge, and that's the character of like the villain. Of course, the villain's gonna have like a shady guy that he like knows to go stay with.
Yeah, sure. I didn't. I felt like overall, just that kind of series of scene. I don't know. It didn't. It was not useful for the plot overall. Because I was also
Yeah,
just like, well, why do you? Why wouldn't you just travel through the night or something? It doesn't seem like you've already been up for a whole day or something. So there's just a few things about that I was like, that's kind of odd. So the kind of when this bad henchman guy kind of has Rain, he throws her on the bed there, and it's like, here, guy, you can have her for a little bit or something, but then she's coming with me. And so the other two, Michael Madsen and the other guy that are kind of the good characters that are sort of trying to, they had been working with Rain, they're trying to, rescue her back. They end up breaking into this place, and here became one of my biggest flaws with the movie, among the other things, and it's not even important, but it just made so little sense to me that it bothered me. So they're fighting this kind of bad vampire guy and a few of his bad people, and Michael Madsen looks up and sees a stained glass window, and he shoots it out, and sunlight starts coming in and hitting the vampire guy, and then he shoots another stained glass window, and there's more light, etc. And I'm just like, listen, a couple things. If you're a vampire and it's actual daytime, shouldn't you be sleeping? Is that not how these vampires work? Do they not? Because in good vampire stories, the vampires sleep in darkness during the daytime in a place where no sunlight could come in, and they do that because the sun kills them. This guy is just hanging out in a room with windows during the daytime. Why
well,
is he doing that?
one of them was covered with like a rag or something. You know, he was trying to
Yeah.
keep the sunlight out. But
Yeah.
it's a brothel, so it's the middle of the night for them. So they're partying like through the night or something.
Yeah. And then they sleep at nighttime,
I
apparently.
guess, yeah. You know, some vampires don't care, man. They're just
Maybe. I think that I think this is a kind of thing that does get me about some types of movies. If you're going to use, just a classic monster kind of character, and then you also just make up your own rules and lore about how they work, generally that tends to bother me because I'm like, listen, the stories of vampires, they're not like 20 years old. They're like 1,000 years old or something. And
yeah,
even, just in literature, they're 200, 300, 400 years old. So in a movie like this, where they're just kind of inconsistent about how the vampires work, they don't really follow a lot of the traditional rules. I usually, my question is just, well, why wouldn't you? Wouldn't it be easier to stick to like kind of classic, simple mythology that goes with these vampires? The
yeah.
ones in this movie don't seem to do that. It does kind of annoy me a few different times. Okay, next biggest super specific detail that really did bother me. So so I think Kagan gets word. Oh, his henchman ends up like losing Rain, but kind of gets back to the villain. And obviously Kagan the villain is upset, like, you missed her again, you let her go, etc. And this guy reports to him that basically that he noticed that Rain like had this eye talisman. It was in her own head. And so Kagan goes, oh, the eye assimilated. And the reason it bothered me so much is because the monk said that the eye absorbed. And those are two different words that do mean two different things. And I was like, listen, is the monk's idea of what happened different than Kagan's idea of what happened? Or is the writer of this movie just a moron and they forgot that they had already used a word to describe what happened? And in a movie like this, where there's a lot of flaws, those are the type of things that like stick with me, where I'm like, listen, I mean, you had the chance to just say the same thing 2 times, but you chose to say it differently each time. What's
Well,
up with that?
I got some fun facts that might talk about that. So, specifically what you just talked about.
I think I got all kinds of other just little details where you're like, that doesn't make
Oh, dude,
sense. That
I
part
got,
doesn't make sense.
I got so many. I'm gonna hit fire some of the details of this
Yeah,
stuff that
you go ahead and just
I
give
was
me a
weird.
few rapid fire, like, what's the deal with that?
So,
What's the deal with that?
so at one point they both, both I think it's Brimstone's like the society. So them and Ben Kingsley both get word of this girl in the circus and stuff, and Ben
Yeah,
Kingsley's been looking for her for years. I mean, since she was a little girl, maybe 20
right,
years, based on age. And it's like, how do you not hear of this girl for the past 20 years that you've apparently been searching for? And it's like pretty
right.
obvious of like her powers and stuff. So like that, yeah, that was kind of ridiculous. I love when she was leaving the circus, the girl that gave her the weapons, like you see a scene earlier where she's like, oh, my uncle's gonna come soon and like whisk us away and we can leave the carnival. And she's seeing Rain leave and she immediately is like, here, take my weapons and leave and get out of here. And it's like, well, wouldn't she go with her though? Like, wouldn't she be like,
Why
oh
don't
yeah,
you
we're
both
escaping?
just run off
Yeah,
right now?
why not? Yeah, why not just go with her? I don't know why that didn't
For
happen.
sure.
The love thing between Rain and then Elle's boyfriend from Legally Blonde. I can't remember his name.
Yes.
Um, but like that happens so fast. I mean, it's like this. I'd have to relook at it, but it feels like the second time they were ever together. They had sex and got it on, and then they were like in love, and it was like, okay, come on. Like I get that's just such a classic like thing you're gonna shove into a movie like this, but there was zero effort made into doing that.
Yeah, no build up, and it was super forced. And, the sex scene itself, logistically, I was like, I have a lot of questions about how this situation is working. People, you got to watch the movie, but she pushes him up against the cell door, and then she kind of like grabs onto the cell and then puts her feet against the cell, maybe? She's off the ground. That's the
Yeah.
point here.
Oh
One
yeah,
way or
dude.
another, she's holding herself off the ground and having sex with the dude. And I was like, I don't believe you. I
Well,
don't think you're strong enough.
you forget she's a gold medalist gymnast, man. You just
Yeah,
saw her go through the wheels of doom in there, man.
there's just types of things where it's like, listen, dude, we all love a sex scene. I'm on board for it. There's a bed right there, and you're doing like this weird gymnast thing.
It is.
This
She's
isn't
in the cage. There's a bed like two feet from them.
this isn't a shower scene, a bar scene. We're out in the barn. There literally is just a bed there, and you're like, what if we did a more complicated version? Why do that? Yeah. All
I
right,
I
keep going.
missed too. So she went and saw a fortune teller that like just knew she was whatever, and she like connected with her. That was kind of weird. But she starts going through these cards, and I don't remember if she like told her I think she tells her like about the eye and stuff, but I don't remember her telling her like where it's at or anything. I was like, well, how did she know to go to this monastery? How did she know to go there? And then going there, she also just like steals a horse and leaves. And like actually to me, which this is so small, to me that's like the biggest thing that jumped out because I was like, dude, they're not gonna let this woman just come in here and like steal someone's horse. Like they'd be ringing a bell and grabbing pitchforks and
Yeah.
like hunting this girl down because like
Yeah.
they would not allow that to happen. And that was one thing I saw that I was like, that was the biggest pet peeve of mine of like she couldn't just steal this horse. Like, come on, even if it was
Yeah,
meant to.
not in that setting. And that was towards the beginning when she sees this. Basically, she's walking through this town. She starts just seeing vampires because their faces just change. And I'm like, is that in your mind? Do you
Yeah,
have vampire sense? Or are they
I think it's
changing their
like
faces?
I think she's got a sense, so she knows. That's like part of being like that damn fear person is that like you can see that. Which I was gonna say I did like that. That was one effect that I liked that they did of like the morphine of the face, whether it was a really quick thing or a slow thing. I liked any time that they did that. I think that was decent.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I also don't understand why exactly. But that's a little bit of like, even in other vampire stuff that I like more, I never exactly understand, like, I guess they're making their faces look human so they blend in, and then their other face is just their real face. Is that how you usually take it?
Yeah, yeah.
I guess I just think if I'm a powerful vampire, I don't fucking care what I look like. I'll look like a vampire all the time and people
Well, you
can
gotta
fight
you gotta
me.
blend you gotta blend in though.
I don't know if you have to if you're a powerful vampire.
Well, at least for not that they told us a lot, but it seems like there's a ton of vampires that are just like out and about, and people don't like vampires for the most part. It seems like
Right.
so. In this world of common vampires, it seems like you did need to blend in.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And that maybe they, there's probably various levels of like how strong they are and stuff. And so the ones that are just hanging out in town looking like people, I guess they're not that strong. And that's why Kagan is the strongest one and he looks, I don't know. He can be the most strong one, I guess.
I got a couple more like at the end that I can wait if you want to share if you got some you want to share.
Yeah, I'll throw in just a couple other things. Just these minuscule details, but we watch a lot of movies, we pay attention to writing and the phrasing of how people say stuff. And when you're watching something you really like, best case scenario, you're just like, oh man, this dialogue is so good. It's written well, it makes sense, etc. Then on the other end is movies like this where people just keep saying things where you're like, I don't understand why that doesn't make sense. So the Brimstone Society, they have their own, castle, house, whatever. And at a certain point, uh, I think Michelle Rodriguez's character is like, hey, we're starting to run out of food. We need to go to the mainland to get some more food.
Yeah,
And I was like, so you guys are on an island because you said the mainland, so you need to leave the island you're on. So you're on an island, but you don't grow your own food or raise animals. You just have to go to the mainland to buy food. And I'm just like, for me, that makes no sense. You're this like secret society and you like own an island, I guess, and just
I yeah
fish,
I
grow your own
I
food,
kind of
like do
I kind of felt
something.
like they didn't explain it very well, but it sounds like there's a bunch of these brimstones around the area, and
Mm-hmm.
like Kagan's been like destroying them and killing people there. So I kind of thought this was like a the last stronghold where people like ran to go hide. So that's the vibe that I got. They didn't say that, and I think that's a
Okay.
super valid point. But it did seem like this was just the last castle that they had that Brimstone had of refuge, and they were just trying to survive it out there and figure out their next step. But it also could have just been another one where it's like, yeah, why aren't they just like fishing or like farming or something like that? Minimum fishing for sure.
But providing for your own self in one type of way, if you're kind of this supposedly self-sustaining society. Let's see, other little stuff. The couple guys she's with, they're like, hey, we had maybe it's when she's in the Brimstone Society. They're like, hey, we had uh, our tailor, our clothes making guy, make you a new outfit, and they just give her an outfit that looks exactly the same as the one she's wearing,
I
but it's
thought that
made
I
out
was
of
like, wait, when did
leather
she change?
instead.
Yeah.
It's just made out
Oh
of
yeah.
leather, and I'm like, I guess that's fine. You know that's what she looks like. And then with that, in a scene where, she catches up with Michelle Rodriguez in this cave when Michelle Rodriguez is already underwater, Rain takes off her leather sleeves and sets them down, and then she just dives in with all the rest of her leather clothes on. And I'm just like, listen, what are you doing? It doesn't make any sense. Dudes that are wearing clothing just jump in the water if that's what they're doing. Taking off one piece of clothing and nothing else. It's just like, why would you do that? Who would do it
Yeah.
that way? She attacks Michelle Rodriguez underwater in just the least effective way I've ever seen. She tries to just wrestle her, I guess. I don't know. I I don't know why she did that.
Dude, the knife at the end, like hitting the ground, was like not how a knife would drop in the water. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
It spun around
Oh,
and
it
then
definitely
like
sank weird.
and then yeah, it sank raw. And I was like, that's not how objects fall in the water. Especially that would be
Right.
like heavy. Like that would have been like kind of a heavy object. So
Yeah, Michelle Rodriguez, ends up kind of stabbing Rain and then just swimming off. And then Rain is fine. I gotta sneeze. Sorry. Rain just heals, I guess. And she swims after Michelle Rodriguez and kind of like, as Michelle's crawling out, Rain kind of like grabs her and then ends up killing her, I guess. And even that, you're just like, how this is working, it's just, it's not very good. The choreography of this scene, not great.
didn't and like she went with other people there, and when she's, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it looked like she went to a different spot, but when she swim back to where her like friends were at for help,
The,
no,
the only thing
she
I can
popped
figure
out.
is, because I thought this during the moment, Michelle Rodriguez had told them to like go watch the entrance. So I don't think they would
Okay.
have been right at the edge of the water, but I was also like, well, it seems like Rain came in from a different direction. Did you know there was a different direction she could come in from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So they were diving under there to get the heart. So I guess she has the heart now. And so she approaches the castle. And I guess her idea is, I'm just going to go up there and be like, hey, let me talk to Kagan. And then they take the heart from her and put her in a jail cell just immediately. And I was like, your plan sucked, dude. All you did was walk in and be like, can you capture me? Is that cool? And then they did. And then the guys are like, I guess there's only one way in. And they just go up and get captured. Now all three of these people are just
Yeah.
in jail cells for no
That,
reason.
yeah, that didn't really make any sense. I love classic, like they never checked the box either to see if it was in there or not.
Nope, comes up towards the very end. So the two guys, one of them goes, Michael Madsen's character goes, "Hey," to the guard, "Hey man, the guy that was in here with me disappeared." And the guard goes, "Oh, what do you mean? I will open the cell door and look for him." And obviously the dude swings down and kicks him. I'm just like, are you the biggest dumbass that's ever been a guard? You just were like, oh, let me look for the guy you said disappeared. Let me open the door for you. It was
I'm
so just absurd.
I'm pretty sure too. Like Michael Madsen says, like my compadre I came in here with seems to have disappeared. Like the line he says is like really funny.
Oh,
The way that
yeah.
he said it.
And then when it works, he goes, I can't believe that worked. And I was like, fucking me too, dude. I can't believe that worked. No way it would have worked.
Yeah.
So I guess, we've been through most of the storyline. The ending is kind of ends the way it ends. There's a big kind of battle scene. She ends up killing the bad guy. Both of her friends die. Pretty much everyone dies except her. That's
Yeah.
it. Like, she is like, I guess I'm alone again. And then they needed to get one more thing that made me go, what now? Everyone dies. And she like walks up and sits down on the throne. And that's like the
Yeah.
end of the
Yeah,
movie.
dude. I was like, that's so weird.
And I'm like, I don't understand what you want me to think is happening. This
She's the
dude is
captain now.
not, this dude, like the Kagan, he's not like the king of anything or a ruler. He
Well,
just is
he's a self proclaimed ruler who is
right.
he is like in charge of like that land.
Okay. She's not going to be in charge of anything though.
Yeah.
And really, it's the type of movie where it ends and you're like, it's cool that she reached her goal, but all of her new friends are dead. She already said she doesn't have family. This is a super depressing ending, dude. She's just gonna be around. It's just, it was a little bit unsatisfying ending for me, because if they were going to kind of do the movie well. Maybe the guy that she just met and fell in love with, maybe he's the one person that doesn't die. And then they're like, hey, we're going to go fight the other vampires together.
Yeah,
But she's the
I
only
mean,
one that lived. So what
she
now?
offered to turn him into a vampire, and he said no.
Right. Which, again, why? Why wouldn't you? Most of the time in that scenario, it's like, well, I can either become a vampire with you or I can die. I guess I'll just die. I hate
Well,
you now after we fell in love a week ago.
that's probably like an oath or something they take when they are these vampire hunters. They're like, I shall not ever vampire. I assume, you
Yeah,
know.
it could be that. It could be that. So, I mean, I don't know. I think the ending made sense, I guess, for the most part, based on kind of how the story had gone. But I wouldn't say it ends and you're like, oh, I feel satisfied by kind of how that wrapped up. It was a
Yeah.
little bit like, no, well, I guess the story's over. There's not a lot of like, oh, I'm glad, I think it worked out good, etc. You're like, well, yeah, it's over now. I guess that's something.
Yeah, a couple things too, like near the end of the movie. So Michelle Rodriguez goes to get the heart because she says like her grandpa put it there, and I'm like, so they wanted to find these three, and why is she waiting until now to get them if they need them? Like she's also getting it for her dad. Like that was kind of a side thing that was they didn't really talk a lot about. That like now she wanted her dad to like her dad had become a vampire and she wanted her dad to kind of like take over and take Kagan's spot. So maybe she didn't want to get it yet because she was deciding about her dad, but it kind of seemed like for a while they were like, oh, we got to get these two. I don't know if they knew that the bone had been found or not, but we got to get these two other relic things, and she knew where it was at the whole time and waited till the end to go get it. I don't know, and then the side thing with like her dad becoming like the one in control had like 2 minutes of screen time and was like not even in the movie at all. It's just that didn't
And
make
it
any
was a
sense.
completely untied up end. He just, he's still alive. He wasn't part of the final battle or anything. But what? Like his story, it really didn't go anywhere and was just kind of left floating out there when the movie ends. There's no reference back to him, doesn't show him again. Yeah, that part, probably could take that out. Take it or leave it.
There was a really funny scene during the battle at the end too, where I mean everyone's getting sliced up. There's blood spurts everywhere, crazy
For
crazy
sure.
battle stuff going on. But there's one I forget who the people were because it was like kind of main people. But someone has a sword on somebody, and they like go to cut them, and it was like the way it looked. They went to go they cut them, and not the spot where the big gashing cut was at. But they like just got done cutting them like in a spot lower than that, and I was like, ugh, like that looked really bad because like they didn't cut. It just was like, oh yeah, we're not going to do another take on that. That's fine. We're just going to leave it.
Yeah, I had a bunch of little notices about the weapons and stuff just looking really cheap. And like I don't know if you noticed or if you were kind of paying close enough attention, but there was a lot of different moments where the swords looked like they had these like chunks out of them, like where the swords had been hitting together. And I was like, I've never seen this in a
Yeah,
movie. I've never seen it look like the swords are bad and in bad condition and stuff. And I think it's those little details. They made this great scene and these big whatever, but there's these little details where you're like, this stuff looks cheap if you kind of are looking closely enough. And if you're going to be doing like different close-ups on swords and stuff, maybe you got to spend more money on swords than what you spent on them because they didn't look very good.
well, they probably kept using the same ones over and over again.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. It almost looks like they made these sort of prop swords, and as they're using them, they start looking like they've been used. You can't do that. Your movie is gonna look silly if you make
Yeah.
it. If you have that type of just small weird error, it's gonna make the movie look kind of bad.
Yep.
So let's kind of launch into the last little thing about ratings, final thoughts, extra maybe tidbits or that type of thing.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, give me some
Okay.
wrap ups.
Yeah, so I got a 3 on IMDb, which I mostly agree with. I think I'd give it a 4. Um, it wasn't like they had nobodies in there that made it even worse. I mean, the a lot of the camera work and the dialogue and just the way the scenes went, like that stuff, you could just fix that stuff. Like the movie could have been so much better if the fixable things were fixed,
Yeah,
that they had done. So I think I give it a 4 though. And honestly, as I thought about, hey, what would I change? Because I like, although a little generic, because it's like Underworld, to me basically. I don't remember if Underworld had a plot that was like exactly like this, and they're like 6 movies that they've done.
I
But
literally looked up on purpose because I couldn't remember for sure the title. I thought of Ultraviolet first, and I was like, this is just kind of Underworld, but worse. But I think it's one of those things where Underworld was probably relatively successful, and it came out like 2 years before this. And I think it was one of those type of things where they're like, people liked that. Let's do a fighty action vampire bloody thing. And then we
yeah,
got
yeah.
this. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So, really, really like the plot itself. I wouldn't tweak a lot, but I would say like a little more backstory of like her. They do talk about her like as a kid, and her Kagan like raped her mom. Really? So one thing I forgot to mention that I thought was just kind of weird. So she mentioned multiple times like I watched you rape her, and the flashback they keep going to, he just kills her. He doesn't rape her or anything. So I
Right.
thought that was weird because she just kept bringing that up, that had happened. And if if they had sex again after she was born, wouldn't he have like found her then? Because he didn't come until she was like a child later. I don't know. It just seems like he came back one time because he was suspicious that she actually had a girl. I don't know. Nitpicking stuff, but
But there was a lot
just thought,
about
thought that
that
was
type
funny.
of backstory and flashback that didn't make sense because it's one of those, I guess, I think if I was understanding properly, Kagan and Rain's mom, they had had sex at some point. Rain is born, and I think Kagan doesn't know that for a long time. He doesn't know that
Hmm.
he like has this daughter, I guess. So then maybe he learns of it and he comes back looking for her,
Yeah.
kills the mom. Rain is just hiding in the closet, dog. It's a room with a closet. If you didn't find her then,
Well, it was a hidden. No, it was like a hidden spot because it was like in the. It wasn't it wasn't just a closet. It was
it
like a
was like a
hidden
wall or
area.
something.
Yeah, yeah, it was a hidden spot. Yeah,
I guess that's
but
fine.
still,
It's still
he
just
like
like
doesn't.
it doesn't seem like you tried that hard to find her at that time.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then, what, 15, 20 years pass, and then she ends up walking up to your door and giving herself up, apparently.
yeah. I mean, I don't think he looked that long, but between that, but yeah. So I think a
Yeah.
little more backstory of like her growing up, coming to what has she been doing for 15 to 20 years. I don't know the time frame exactly, but a little more of that, and then just make the main plot of the movie would be like we're searching for these three, relic things, which they did. One of them Kagan had quickly like that. One of them was a pretty quick scene with the heart, like that didn't last that long, and then like a decent, like she went to the monastery and Indiana Jones did out of there and stuff. Like that was, it was okay, but I think that should have been a bulk of the movie. Is like, well, we're searching for these things, and there's
Yeah.
like major things we need to do to get them, and then a big infiltrate battle thing at the end. Like that should have been a bulk of the movie, but it was more about her, like she connected with the brimstone people and like trained there, and like a little bit about because it was also only like an hour and a half. I mean, it was a shorter movie too. But those are kind of two things that I'd say. Because again, if they just fixed the fixable things, it would
Yeah.
have been such a better movie.
I think definitely just streamlining the plot and removing a few of the things. Michelle Rodriguez's dad, and he used to be part of Brimstone. He's a vampire now. I think you cut out a bunch of those little parts because it doesn't really matter. Like, those are just kind of these extra threads of storylines. And it muddles the movie. It just adds this extra stuff that if you're only gonna have a 90-minute movie, it's really okay to have like a lot simpler plot than what you tried to encompass in this short of a movie, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I think ratings, I think I'm with you. This might be one of the first times. I was gonna look back through, all these episodes we've done. This might be the first time where, this historically iconic bad movie, I'm just like, yeah, it's kind of just bad. There, to an extent, I enjoyed it, I guess, because it's kind of fun. There's some adventure, there's some fighting. I like vampire mythology, I like medieval type of stuff. But all in all, this is not going to be one of the times where I say, "Oh, I think it deserves a way better rating." That's what I do a lot of times. This one, I agree with you. I think 3 for me is like, this is total garbage, everything's bad, etc. I think it's got to be a little bit better than that, because some of the some of the actors do pretty good, although probably like the worst versions of these big actors that I've seen. I mean,
Yeah.
I like Michelle Rodriguez quite a bit. Certainly not one of her better roles overall. Obviously Ben Kingsley in some types of ways like won an Oscar and stuff. This is not some of his
Well,
best
dude, and
work.
they like way underused him too. Like I wish I could like get a montage, but it's like 90% of his scenes he's like sitting or standing in his like
Mm-hmm.
throne room,
And he
like
talks for like a minute.
giving orders. Yeah,
Yeah, a minute
that's
at a
like the
time,
whole
5
thing.
times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's this is wild.
So I think I agree with you. I think it needs to bump up a little bit. I think 3 is a little too low, but it's like a 4. And this, I go on my like, is it good? Did I enjoy it? I I didn't dislike it. I wasn't like, I'm bored, please end. But I wasn't actively enjoying it. There wasn't anything in particular that I thought like, oh, this was great. I mean, I liked the settings, the scenery, kind of that stuff I said at the beginning. But yeah, I mean, I think a 4 is fine. I think it needs to get bumped up a little bit, but it's not good. I think it. I am a little surprised that it didn't do like a little bit better in the box office, just because I would think like maybe people would have gotten like, more people would be interested quick enough and not, it must have started getting bad buzz like really fast, which in
Yeah.
2005 is like a little bit surprising. Like you would almost think, it's not like 2 hours after a movie releases nowadays people can look up reviews and stuff. So
Yeah, I
for
think this
2005 too, I thought it looked pretty good. I thought it's got some like decent star power. So I'm a little bit surprised it flopped so bad.
this wasn't one of ended up being one of my fun facts I had, but I think if I remember correctly when I was reading, it premiered and it flopped at like the premiere did, so a bunch of theaters pulled out from like even having it. So
Oh,
they didn't
yeah.
they it went from like it was supposed to be like 2,500 theaters and it went down to like 1,600 or something like that. So like that was I think that was part of it. It's like from
Yeah.
the get go, people pulled out from even showing it.
That makes complete sense. Yeah. So I'm going to do a quick kind of little riff tangent for one of the last things to wrap up with. So I had asked you ahead of time, if you had any kind of connection to this director, if you knew much of anything about him. And his name's Uwe Boll. He's German, I'm pretty sure. And I had known of him and some of just the kind of lore about his movies, probably 10 or 12 years ago at least. And we both discussed there was a movie, I think 2 years after this, in 2007, that we saw back then called In the Name of the King. That's just sort of another medieval, dungeon quest kind of movie that we saw when we were, 14 or 15, whatever, and we thought it was pretty good. So there's a YouTube creator named Dosa Buckley that's just kind of a YouTube comedian. He kind of talks about pop culture stuff, whatever, that I've been watching for maybe like 12 or 13 years. And about 10 years ago, he did a video about this director because the director had posted just kind of a rant video complaining about Kickstarter. And basically, just, this director has been making movies once or twice a year from like 2000 through like 17 or 18. Like he'll make a couple movies every year. they almost exclusively are like 4 or below. A lot of them are like 2.5, 3. They pretty much always flop at the box office, etc. So I had I had kind of heard of him and knew of him way back then. Of you know it's a interesting weird thing of like, how does he keep making these movies? Like, maybe he funds them, but he was just really mad about crowdfunding, and he was really mad about like, I'm trying to get money to make this movie and I don't get it. Why won't people give me money? And the YouTube creator that I watch is like, it's because your movies do bad. Like, by the time you're doing this rant in 2014 or 15, you've got 8 or 10 movies that have completely flopped. Why would anyone give you money? You would be a terrible investment for, a big studio to give you money for or something. So I'm kind of interested to like just research a little bit more because it's a little bit different. Some of the other movies we've watched, we always talk about Showgirls because that was the first one we did and it was big. That director was kind of like a real director, and some of his other stuff did do pretty well, and he did direct for years after that, etc. And so it's interesting with Uwe Boll, every single movie he's done is bad. How does he keep making movies? There's directors that made a couple movies that I loved, and then you never heard from them again. And so there's just a lot of kind of like mystery about that. I feel like that I'm kind of curious about.
Nobody knows, man. Nobody knows what happens.
Don't ask questions about it. There's no
Yep.
real answers. So yeah, I think to wrap up, it was. I think we both thought it was fine. We weren't like, I hate this, please get over. But we're not gonna probably tell anyone like, hey, you gotta go watch this.
Probably
It's
not. Not gonna
slightly
happen.
better than the IMDb rating, but otherwise pretty fair rating. I would say overall, this is one of the worst movies we've done. I don't think there's a whole lot that's like super redeeming about it, or that you know there's not a whole lot that makes you go, no, it's fine, let me defend this movie. Not a whole lot to it.
That's true. That's true. I'll give you some some fun fact stuff about it.
Right on.
So the best one that was like a main one that I saw was that like the director had demanded the script in like a few weeks from the writer. So she gave him a rough draft, and they just used that rough draft for the whole movie. They never redid it. They never went back through and did multiple rewrites of it. They used that for the whole movie. So then I was reading like throughout the movie, the actors and the director they just changed stuff here and there, like lines and things that happened. And by the end of it, like it didn't really resemble at all the rough draft that they had, which I was like, that makes total sense because there's a
Yeah,
bunch of just weird stuff in it and like things that are like totally different that don't make sense, and it's choppy. I was like, that makes total sense. So that's what happened.
that's pretty wild.
Yeah. The brothel we were talking about. So a lot of the women that they had in there were real prostitutes that they had hired because that was cheaper than paying actresses for it. So I forget if they were Russian prostitutes where they were filming at. If it was Russia, I can't remember for sure. But wherever
Oh
they
yeah, I
filmed
forgot to
that,
look up.
they got real prostitutes
That
for
is
that, which I thought was
just
crazy.
absolutely wild.
In an interview, the director had said that Michael Madsen was drunk throughout most of um, the production of the movie and stuff that they were doing.
Yeah.
Jessica Alba was actually the first choice and offered the part, but she had turned it
Wow.
down. She turned it down, not because it was bad. She just thought it was too gory for her, which that makes sense
No.
by a little bit
Especially
of
yeah, in
the
2004 or 5 for
yeah.
her.
And I feel like she probably just got done doing Fantastic Four. Did that come out in 04 or was that 05?
I bet yeah, I think that was like 04.
And then Ben Kingsley only said yes to doing it because he like always wanted to be a vampire in a movie. I
Yeah,
think he regrets it a little bit, but that was
I
like
would say so.
the main reason why he said yes to doing it.
Yeah, so on IMDb, all of the filming locations are listed as Romania. There's a handful of like different parts of Romania, but they're all listed as that. Be interesting.
Interesting.
Well, I don't have much of anything else to kind of wrap up about it. I think that
Did you
yeah,
want to talk about like video game movies at all?
oh yeah, I guess yeah, we had just talked off air a little bit about, I would say ever since we were, 10 years old or something, every so often and before that too, but every so often there's, a movie made that's based on a popular video game or sometimes not, and sometimes I've seen those movies without even like knowing it was based on a game at the time because I wasn't familiar with it. And I think they almost always do badly. They almost always like, don't capture the spirit of the game really that well, or they don't look quite the right way. The fans of the actual game get hyped, they go watch it, it's never as good. Regular audiences that don't have a connection to the video game don't really get the movie that well. And so it is just it's kind of a curious hypothetical thing of like, why don't these work? Like, why do a lot of these video game based movies just not end up working very well? And why do they keep making them too? I can't think of a ton of different ones, but I remember like Doom, that movie came out, and I think it was like The Rock too,
Yeah.
relatively early in his acting career. And I liked that pretty well, but I don't think it was like great. I don't think fans of the game liked it. I don't think people liked it. And then more recently, even maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, there was a movie called Monster Hunter, which again, I had never even played the game, but it was kind of a monster fantasy movie, and I thought it was fun, but it wasn't great. It didn't do well at the box office, and I guess the question is just like, why do they keep making these movies? Because it's not like, big franchises that people maybe are like, oh, they're not that good, but they keep making a bunch of money. A lot of cases with these different video game movies that come out, they end up bombing. A lot of times they have huge budgets like this one and they bomb. So it makes me wonder how they keep getting greenlit. Why can't they, do a better job? Why don't they follow the game more specifically? Stuff like that.
I think that's kind of the issue is that like a lot of times they do follow the game, and a video game is not the same recipe as like a good movie. And I feel
Yeah.
like part of that is like a movie a movie parts are supposed to like build and climax up to the climax at the end, and a video game can do that, but there's a ton of it doesn't have to at all, and the video
Yeah.
game really is like separate. They're separate missions and just things that happen that have to do with each other that may or may not have anything to do with like the end goal. So I feel like a lot of times they're trying to make the video game the same, and it's like it just doesn't translate the same because it's just not the same um, as a movie. But if you don't do that, the people that play the video game are definitely not going to like it, which is a good chunk of your audience that's like wanting to see it. So it's a hard. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a hard thing to realize, but I do think I feel like people just sometimes need to, which I don't know one off the top of my head if it's happened, but just to like take the idea and the characters and like kind of the overview, the 30,000 foot view of this video game, world, and then let me make a movie out of it like Horizon Zero Dawn. I'm sure they'll make a movie out of that at some point,
Yeah.
and that could be really good, or it could be a total flop. That's a PlayStation game that's pretty popular. But
Yeah.
just like taking the world and that thing and like making your own movie, getting some writers together, like okay, like what would be cool? Maybe we use some from the game, or maybe we don't. Um, and go from there. But that's hard to do. I do get that.
Yeah. I was trying to think, like, has there been a video game adaptation that I saw that I actually thought was like a good movie? And I was looking just real quickly kind of through Reddit of a post like that. And one, somebody mentioned Mortal Kombat from 95. I think that one is, for the most part, like a lot of people think that that's like a pretty good standard for video game movies. And I think I've seen it. I don't remember much of it, but I think people like that pretty well. It
Yep,
seems like that most recent Super Mario Brothers movie, as far as anyone I've ever talked to, they seem to love that.
it was good.
And I
See
think,
that? So that's yeah, that's a good example. That just like took the world of it and just kind of. And although I mean, like, yeah, the general plot is like what a lot of games and stuff are about, but it's like that was more of they just kind of did their own thing. That wasn't like they were following a game, which of course there's like hundreds of games and stuff, but they weren't
yeah,
following a game that they were like trying to do or anything.
they basically took all the elements from the game. They took all these
Yeah,
different iconic characters, Mario and Luigi and Peach and Bowser. They took a lot of the visuals of the worlds and the castles and the water and some of that type of stuff. And then they wrote an actual storyline that just kind of involves all those rather than let's take the first Super Mario game and just try to make a movie where he's going through all the levels or something like that. I think that's a
yeah.
great example. I could
Any
probably just
other
kind of keep going
other
on and
thoughts?
riffing and thinking about this type of stuff, but I think I'm pretty well wrapped up. This is probably one of our least favorite movies that we've done so far. I would
Yeah,
I guess I would tell someone like, hey, if you're just super bored, you have an hour and a half, and you don't like good movies, go check it out or something. But it doesn't really reach that level of like fun enough or bad enough or funny enough.
that's what I was gonna say. Like, it's short of being like, oh, this movie's so bad because like they could have done the full Monty and like do that, but they didn't. They didn't quite get there with it. So
it's like just good enough to not be bad or funny or something, but it's just confusing and silly and boring enough also to not be, just really good.
yeah,
Still glad we watched it. It's one of those movies that I probably heard the name, 15 plus years ago whenever it came out, but I'm, it would not have been a good movie to watch if we were not going to record a podcast and dissect it and talk about it. If I just watched it just cuz, I'd be like, well, that was not worth my 90 minutes. So I'm glad that we at least got to talk about it and we got to make some good comedy out of it.
well, it's been a good hour plus or so of looking into Bloodrayne, but we'll see you next time. This has been Connor and Tanner and Two Glasses in a Movie, and we'll see you next time.
Catch you on the flip side.